Bruce, you must have something really good too.
Of course I do. It's Bruce Danielson, and I guess I'm here to entertain you too.
Good evening. Welcome to this meeting of the Districting Commission. We'll begin with a approval of the minutes from our August 26th meeting. Take a roll call vote.
Just to get a motion.
Oh, that's right. First things first. Motion, if there are any questions, concerns, changes that need to be made to the minutes, otherwise I'll take a motion to approve.
I'll move to approve the minutes.
A second.
Thank you. Now, roll call vote.
Commission members Hurlbert,
Aye.
Johnson,
Aye.
Kipley,
Aye.
Millage,
Aye.
Timian.
Aye.
That passed 5-0. Next item on the agenda under unfinished business, we have several options that various maps and proposals that have been shared with us by Jeff and several more since. I think the best approach to this, Jeff, if you want to kind of walk us through, I know we've got a lot of options in front of us, and we've all, I think, spent some time looking at them and maybe noodling them and maybe have some questions on some of them. But if we kind of go through them, and then I think we'll kind of take them in order as to how we want to move forward. But go ahead, and the floor is yours.
Excellent. I'll give a summary on each one, and then please ask questions or comments as we kind of go along. The first slide we have up pretty much at every one of our district and commission meetings is the charter criteria. We have these 5 criteria that we continue to follow since the charter. The main emphasis that we continue to try to do is to look at the 5 districts and get them in 5 equal areas. We're continuing to follow that there's no such deviation that exceeds the 5%, so we're trying to follow that. We're looking at contiguous areas. They should not be divided. The precincts should not be divided. So again, when some of them are really large, we don't get to split them in half. We can do that at a following date, but not during the districting portion. We would like to have the districts remain in only one territory or as few as possible. And then again, being consistent with that, the aggregate length remains pretty standard. So we're doing that as best as we can at this point. So from the last time, we have some unfinished business. This is C7. I've tried to keep some of these labeled with C when we were really looking at the C Central District. So with C Central, we looked at adding some of the north east districts into the central, and we have always tried to, or recently, I shouldn't say always, we've tried to take 3-6 from the northwest and bring it into the central. So this one, we worked on those criteria, but northwest fell below the 5% deviation. So I say it's too high, but it's actually too low. It just falls beyond that 5% deviation on 7. On 8, this was working really good. The numbers were really falling together. I liked it. The spreadsheet was going really well. We were staying consistent with making central, but you can see in the southwest, south central part of town, once I moved 1-3 out of the southwest to the northwest, then we no longer had contiguous areas with 519. The 2 red precincts no longer touched, so we couldn't have this because it was no longer contiguous. So C8, while the numbers worked, it wasn't contiguous. With C9, this one, we were pretty good with the central. The objective of keeping central. You can see 3-6 was coming in. We were looking at the north and the east. We were able to bring 4-1 in. We were not able to bring 4-14 in. 5-8 on the east side was able to move kind of over to the northeast. We didn't do much with the southeast. However, we did take some of the areas in the south central part of town, 210 and 215, and shift them from southeast to southwest. Again, one of the things that we had used as an objective in this was we know from earlier meetings that Central is going to remain kind of stable in population, if not shrink. It's generally staying stable, but all the other districts are really going to be enlarged over time. So we looked at trying to keep Southeast as low as possible because it will be expanding as great as possible over the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years. So that's why we moved those two, 210 and 215. So this one worked, the numbers worked, were contiguous, the other criteria were being met. With option G, this one, again, wasn't necessarily the objective of Central, but it meets most of the objectives. This one I took 4, 5, and really kind of went out of the ordinary and took it from the northeast and moved over the northwest. It's one of those really large precincts geographically and population size-wise, and I moved it. So this was one of the first ones that we kind of changed the boundaries, and it looks a little bit different. So we did that, as well as we took 2, 3, and 2, 6 out of southeast, and we moved those to the northeast. We had a suggestion as an objective to keep southeast around that 26th Street and not drop it down. But on this one, there's a real challenge with trying to keep the numbers to that equation to get the 5% deviation. But option G worked, and you can see it on this one. So those were some of the ones that we had last time, and we had presented them, and then we went forward with new business to this meeting. So any questions on these? Otherwise, I can go forward to new business.
I don't have any questions. I'm wondering if, at this point, do we want to go through a couple of these, whether we want to keep them in or take them out at this point? I mean, Jeff's presented information that shows, you know, some of the challenges with some of them in terms of numbers, in terms of continuity, others that work in terms of both. But if we could go back to C7. Is there anybody that objects to taking this one off the table? Okay.
No.
How about, we'll scratch C7. How about C8? And it's not contiguous. No merit. Okay, let's take that
Remove
one
it.
off. Bob, what was that, Bob?
Yeah, to me, those two that remove criteria.
You're breaking up, Bob. You go ahead and take them off. We'll take 7 and 8 off
Yeah.
for now. Thank you. C9.
I think I'd say let's keep C9 in play at this point.
Okay. And G. I would advocate we keep that one as well. But
I'd agree. Let's keep G for now.
okay. So we've taken 2 of the 4. Keep them in, and we'll move on to new business. Jeff has a few more maps to walk us through.
And you can see how this goes kind of with I've always tried to keep the alphabet consistent, and you can see how this goes here too. So we were at kind of C8, 9, I did a 10, then I went to C11, tried keeping that central whole and adding some areas, and northwest still, I couldn't get it to work, so C11 had dropped off. It became too low. in the northwest when I had tried to add a couple of districts on the other side. Then I tried again with a C11 by moving a couple around. So here what I did was I have in the central, again, I got 3-6, I got 401, I got 414. And then with this one, you can see the difference being on the south end. Going around the horn, you added, and again, all of our eyes are probably about the same, but you added something from the southwest up to the northwest. I moved a south or central district to the southwest in that red area, and then I had to take another central district. I think that's 513 or probably 513, and move that to the southeast. And then 57 is just such a large area. I end up moving that to the northeast. So pretty consistent, pretty stable in the central, but we moved the south end around with some 4 areas. And C11, the numbers work really pretty well. You can see they're pretty consistent for all 5 areas. Okay, then moving on to C12, kind of keeping that same philosophy with C12. This, my summary note, looking down, this is jagged. This is the best way to describe this one. It's keeping central whole, but it's just all over. And I'm even looking on the legend, you can see we move maybe 10 or 12 different precincts. It's 3-6, it's 401, but then you kind of have a line going between 4-1 and 4-5. Those kind of come in and out. You have 2-3 and 2-4, but 2-2 still in the southeast. Down in the south, you have 2-10 and then 2-15, one's in, one's out. So the best way for me to summarize this one is it's not smooth. I mean, all the rest of them, you can kind of see some real good delineation between the districts. This one, if we decide to go with this one, it meets all the charter criteria. It will just have a real jagged boundary on all 4 sides when we get done with this one. But it works. So then I kind of got away from the central and tried just some new options. This was option H. Option H works. It's functional. Again, moving up to the northeast, we move something from northeast into the northwest with I think that's 4-5. We moved 3-6 got moved, which was a real objective, trying to get that in the central. 521 had to come out of central to the southwest, which might be really kind of appropriate going into this to southwest. 2-1 and 2-2 south of the Big Sioux River currently in southeast. You can see got moved into the central district. So for central and southeast, look at this one and see how that represents the districts and how you see about this one. It's functional, it works well, but there are some difference from the standard objectives of keeping central, and the boundaries at 26th Street and 41st Street. So that was option H. Option I was kind of a spin-off of J and H. Again, a lot of moving parts. I will give you a quick summary. You can see in the legend what moved, but a lot around the central. Keeping central pretty whole. 3-6 moved in, 4-1, 4-4, 4-3, 4-2, 4-14. So a lot came into the central. Then you get to the northeast and southeast. Looking down to that southeast portion, you can see we had to take some large population numbers out of the southeast 2, 3, 2, 7, 2, 6, and move them into the northeast to make the numbers work. And then that big Sioux River boundary again, we had to then take some smaller numerical numbers out of central and bring them into the southeast. It gives you some good geographical line boundaries. The representation on the deviation's really pretty good. And it's very functional, and this was option I. So I think those are the ones that I had put together on the agenda.
Thank you, Jeff. So any thoughts? Let's review that list again, go back to C11, which the challenge, as I understand it, is as soon as we take 3-6 out of Northwest, it has to be replaced with something. I believe the cutoff population is about, if I remember right, 36,666, and we're at 36,423. So I could sit here all night and preach about the importance of filling out your census, but you can see the numbers do matter. And as I think as we've worked with some of these, this is what we get into.
But I do appreciate you bringing that up, the importance of completing the census, because you can't say it enough, so.
Couple hundred heads make a huge difference in terms of what we can do. So if we move 3-6, we have to address the Northwest District one way or the other in a contiguous precinct, and there's only a handful of directions we can go there. Looking at at C11, does anyone want to leave that or take that off the table? Maybe I should rephrase that question. Should we take it off the table?
If the Northwest is too high, where
Yes.
it goes over the 5%,
Yes, it does.
yeah, that it looks like to me it should be eliminated.
Yes.
Nodding of heads, so we'll take C11 off. C11A
I would want to retain C11A for now.
fits all the criteria. We'll leave that in. C12? Meets the criteria. Jeff, there were no issues in that regard?
And again, this is just a cross-check again, what the commissioner, the chair is doing. If there's any other criteria in the charter that you guys see, let us know and say take it off. So thank you.
I think we'll leave it in for now, unless, other thoughts?
Yeah, I'm not a big fan of this one, but if we're just kind of going through the exercise of getting down to what's possible, this isn't my favorite map, but if anybody, I think at this rate, I think we're kind of going on a, if anybody wants to leave it in for discussion, we'll err on that side for now, but.
Let's just leave it in.
Okay.
C12? We got H up there.
I thought Joe said keep it in.
Yeah, we're gonna keep C, that was C11A, I think, that we were keeping in, wasn't it? Or was it
And
C?
then-
Oh, I'm sorry, my fault.
and then
You're
Mark,
right.
did you
11A and 12 are both in.
Okay, yeah, on to H.
H. In or out? I tend to take it out, but that's just one opinion.
I'm not a fan of this one, Rick, but if anybody wants to make the merit case for it.
Not a fan.
Yeah,
Remove
I
it.
would think it'd be, to me, it'd be fine to delete H.
Nice effort, Jeff, but we'll take it out.
Okay.
Option I.
I would, because of that, the way that the green section goes into the center, I would not be in favor of moving forward with I.
I think we can discuss, Jeff, correct me if I'm wrong, but as we look at these maps, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 or 6, whatever it is. As we look at a map like this, this isn't a hard and fast map. I mean, if we see some precincts that we could switch around, possibly, if the numbers work. If we were to leave a map like this one in simply for discussion purposes, I think I would do that for now. We can take it out later, but I think generally speaking, as I look at this map, and I don't want to speak for Tom, but this kind of, I think, addresses some of the things he was talking about in our last meeting. So I think for discussion, we should leave it in.
Okay.
So that brings us to additional options.
Yes. So I got two additional options. I have, basically, I got them late, so I don't have a lot of details on them, so I apologize. But what I was able to do is I took C11, and with C11, I was able to add two other precincts and add them from C11. And with that, again, as the chair said, the numbers came in really close, but we were at 5.01 in the Northwest. Correct? It was the Northwest?
5 people.
Five people.
5.01.
And that became my C11B. And so when we looked at it again this last week, it was close, but we missed it by 5 people. It's 5.01. So, and that was just moving 2 more precincts, and it just didn't quite work. So again, we can keep trying to look at some of these options that are really close that you like and move them around, but it's a challenge. And then what we did was we looked at an option J, which is similar to, at the very beginning, an F, which is this kind of H and I. And what I was able to do is 4-1 moved in from the northeast to the central. 2-7 moved from the southeast to the northeast. And then what we did was we moved 4-14 from the northeast to the central, and that met the criteria. It met the deviation. It was contiguous. And so it basically, again, moved only 3 precincts. It was very similar to an earlier option F, and I have a draft map that we can put up on the scan.
The one thing you don't have on there, Jeff, you mentioned 414, that should be kind of yellow
Correct.
with dots, so that would be included in there.
Yes, so I wasn't able to update the maps in a timely fashion, but what we were able to do was 4-1 came in, 4-27 went up, and 4-14 right here came in. So these two go in central, 2-7 went up, so 3 moved. And this was an option J that I kind of put together at the last minute. So that is on the table on whether or not you want to bring it forward for a review. And again, we can get maps put together to have it for a public discussion, or you don't like this one and I can take it off the table.
What this one essentially did was it leaves Northwest alone, and it leaves the Southwest District alone. They don't change at all, so we don't have to, we're not dealing with the large flux in numbers that cause some of those other maps to go out. What it does not do, clearly, it leaves the Cathedral District in the Northwest. I mean, that was one of the things that we had talked about earlier, but I threw this at you just as a discussion.
Correct.
It's a lot simpler than some of the things we're looking at, but I realize it doesn't maybe advance it as far as what we're hoping to do.
I have a question. On some of them, you have, you move 2-7 into the northeast, and then at other times, you move 2-3 and 2-4. They're pretty identical in terms of numbers. How do you determine which you're going to move at any given time?
Sure. 2 reasons numerically is the biggest one. They're close, but they're not the same. And as we've kind of mentioned, sometimes it's less than 10 people just gives you that percentage that doesn't
Right.
work. So numerically is the first one. And other times I've looked at how does it best represent the southeast. So like for this example, do you want to keep southeast, trying to talk to you, South, do you want to keep the ones that are more internal, the 2 precincts that are internal back in the southeast? Or do you take those and bring them up to the northeast and keep your outlying precinct to the southeast? So then you have the jagged tooth kind of on the flip side. I like it, my personal benefit is this way because the southeast has it more internal to the core, and the outlying area, which is the new growth area, isn't really southeast. It can float better than having a floating area internal. So then that's where the first way I look at it is numerically. Second is, you know, which one do you want to bring up? Which one do you want to bring down? So, and I guess a third answer, I'm sorry to be long-winded, is at some point, not with this commission, but in 3 to 5 years, 2-7 is going to be separated. It's going to be divided. It's going to become a 2-7, a 2-8. It's not going to be 7,000 people. So there's going to be a separation of it.
When I look at it, one of my concerns is with 2-3 and 2-4, they're more of residential, traditional neighborhoods, which seems to fit in with what we have up in Northeast. And then you have this heavily populated area, which is mostly apartments, et cetera, that would.
A lot of people, but yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
okay.
Yep. And so that's where, again, that's why you're the representation of those districts, and you go, so where does it fit better to represent that district?
Yeah.
Jeff, I don't mean to put you on the spot, but I'm going to ask you a question. Yeah, you referenced precinct 2-7, and as that grows, and if you look right below it, I think it's 214,
Yeah.
and how big that has gotten. And so when will that time come when someone, whomever, if it's the county auditor's office or whoever it is, looks at that and makes that decision to divide that precinct?
Yeah, I could answer that. It could be, it should wait until after the districting process and also the state redistricting process. In a practical sense, it could be done basically any time after that. However, the challenge is we do have elections coming up this year, so I would foresee something shortly after the election cycle in 2022. Okay.
And that's how it's been historically too. I mean, we get done with our process because you don't want to change them in the middle of our process. And then afterwards with the county, Minnehaha and Lincoln County will sit down and we adjust some of these.
And just one other important point on that is the criteria for adjusting precinct size does have to do with the number of registered voters, kind of indirectly. It's more directly related to wait time at the polls. And traditionally, there really has not been a big problem with wait time at the polls. I think the statute references 30 minutes or more during the day, but it's something that needs to be looked at.
Appreciate the civics lesson. Thank you.
Yeah.
Any thoughts on option J?
I think I would like to keep it for sake of discussion to the next round at least.
Okay. Well, let's move back. Let's just take it chronologically, if that's okay. We'll move back up to C9.
Mr. Greco, would you put the PowerPoint? Thank you.
I know we all have copies of the maps, hard copies of the maps, and so if you take a look, it's kind of comparing C9 and option G. And with C9 up there, what you've done, Jeff, is essentially with C9 you've taken 1-3 was the change you made in the Northwest District, correct? You added that into the Northwest District.
Correct.
And then if you look at the southern part of the city, everything, try and get my geography correct, is that west of Minnesota Avenue, from southeast to southwest.
Correct, that's correct. With 210 and 215, and we've done that, I think, a couple of times. With 210 and 215, they've been in the southeast, and is Minnesota the dividing line or not? And so on this one, we've used Minnesota as the dividing line between east and west and moved them to the west.
So then to get the numbers to balance, it would appear you took 1-4 from southwest and moved that into central.
That's correct.
Okay.
I would, my concern with this map is, we've got two precincts dropping down to 57th Street out of Central. And we've got other ones where we don't have them. To see Central go down to 57th Street kind of makes me cringe. We're trying to consolidate and move Central to Central. And I don't know.
Yep.
That's what troubles me about this map, is having two central counties hitting 57th Street.
That's a good point. One of the criteria is not to cross the county, try to avoid crossing the county
County as
line,
much
right?
as
And
possible.
57th Street is the county line. So
Right.
we're staying within that, but it's right up to the boundary.
And sorry to interject, but there's a possibility too, you can kind of go, I want to put this on this side, not the precincts, but your map options, and say, this one we really like, put it up here. You've already eliminated some, but then start to say, this one's okay, but it's not our favorite, and put it to the side, and then see in the end if you have 2 or 3 that really come up to the top. Because like this one, you're saying, it's okay, but it's not our best. And put that one to the side, but you haven't eliminated it. And then you can go on to G and look at G and go, now does that one better than C9?
One of the reasons I brought up G, and I stapled the two together as my reminder, but what you did in C9 is you moved 1-3 to from southwest to northwest. In G, because trying to make up for that loss of the voters in 3-6, you moved 4-5 from northeast to northwest. And I mean, there are a couple other subtle changes there and some things I think that maybe could be nuanced a little bit, but I mean, that's the one thing that catches my eye. There really are 3 options as I look at these maps and correct me if I'm wrong, with Northwest. Can't leave it alone. And well, you could leave it alone, but if you want Cathedral, if you want 3-6 in the central, something else has to change. So it's either 4-5, 1-3, or then you're looking at 520 or 521. Or I guess you could look at 117, but I tried that. That creates a whole stack of dominoes that start to fall.
Correct.
Yeah.
So then again, on this one, Mrs. Johnson, does 4-5 make sense in the Northwest? Just like you said, dropping down to 57th Street makes you kind of get that feeling. What about 4-5? Does that,
Yeah, I just have trouble with this one, I guess,
Yeah.
because once again, 5 of the changes are in the Northeast.
Yeah.
I would rather see something where, we see other districts
Yep.
moving around.
And like I said, of the 5 times I've done this over the last 20 years, the Northeast is the one that always moves. I mean, we move the Northeast every time, and you'll see 4-1, 4-14, 4-4, 5. We move the Northeast every time. It's the size, it's the location. So, you're right.
And I go back to what you said when we did this 4 years ago, you know, and when you look at what the 10, 20, 40-year predictions are for growth in the city, you mentioned then, you know, we're so traditionally used to the southwest part of the city growing. I remember you saying back then that that's not where the growth is, and there are very valid reasons for that. And there are ways to do this map, and the way you did option G, for example, didn't even touch the southwest. You know, and the growth is the north, and we saw that the population shift when we got the census back. The major growth was northeast, southeast.
So, Mr. Chair, I'm
Yes.
not really hearing any of my colleagues making an affirmative case for C9 or G, but maybe we need to level set once of just which ones are still, did we leave on the table from that first round of cuts? Where do we stand? And maybe just your vision of what are we trying to accomplish tonight, in the sense that at some point, somebody need to call the question of affirmatively proposing one, and we're trying to, as a group, get to a majority vote on one map is our goal tonight?
I think I'd be curious to hear from the commission if there is a particular map here that stands out, because we could go through each one of these and probably nuance every single one of them. But if there's one in particular that Jeff has presented, that we should have a good discussion.
Sure, I'm
This
happy
is
to
Bob.
start if you'd like, Joe. Just as a reminder, I know I brought this up a couple times, but for me, this exercise is, you know, it's about representation, right? And it's not just simply about geography, because geography and population will move. I mean, this will change over time, and who's represented where will change. To me, it's about, it's about identifying representation properly. And so for me, I really like the idea that those core neighborhoods that share some similarities are going to be represented similarly. For instance, and I appreciate the idea of that neighborhood in Cathedral could be represented, somebody there could be represented, and their issues maybe around the narrow lots that are there, or zoning, or diversity, utilities, crime, road issues, whatever, infrastructure issues, whatever they might be, would be represented well within that district, and their vote or who they elect would be representing, you know, the majority of those issues or concerns. And so for me, I think identifying that core, which is going to be uniquely the core, regardless of geography, probably for the duration of this city. So that's why I really like the effort that Jeff's made on several of these, and I think C11A and G, actually specifically thinking of just the core, do a good job. And when I think of the core, I think of Whittier and Pettigrew and Cathedral, All Saints and McKinnon neighborhoods. I think that those should be identified and made into a consistent part of the central district. I think the edges can move more than that, beyond that. Of course, I would love to go east of Cliff, because I think those neighborhoods that you tried to do in 4.3, 4.2, 4.4, you know, you've tried, and there's some challenges there. And I get that there's this may not work, but I really like the idea that 3.6, I like the idea of that, and 4.1 and 4.14. For me, those are strong representations for the central district. So for those reasons, I like C11A quite a bit. I think G would qualify as well, and there might be others. Sorry for the long-winded response.
Well, thank you. That's good input, Tom. Others?
I would just echo some of those sentiments. Probably between those two, I might be leaning towards 11A, but definitely willing to have some more discussions and just hear maybe where all of our colleagues are standing right now.
This is Bob, and I like the C11A, and I think G is fine as well. On C11A, if I looked at the score on the bottom on C11A, would that be 3.07? I'm not seeing that.
I think he's asking for the differentials of the two widest
Yeah,
margins.
Yes.
No,
Yeah,
it'd be
one,
3.07.
yeah, 1.76 on the high end and 1.31 on the low end.
So it'd give a composite of 3.07.
Yep.
Thank you. And the maps I looked at, that'd be my first choice.
Jeff, I have a question. As we do this, you've been through this process several times before. What is the impact as we start to look at moving precincts and shifting precincts? And, you know, it's one thing to Tom's point, you know, you try to get the numbers to balance. But the reality is, I mean, when you look at C11 and you move 6, my eyes aren't functioning very well, 513 from central to southeast, I'm hunching at some point 513 moves back to central. I mean, it's not a given, but most likely it would. Or 511 from central to southwest, again, to get the numbers to work. Have you ever gotten feedback from voters as to what kind of impact that might have on them?
No. Clear and simple. I'm concerned about it. I bring it up. I mean, you can remember and go back to what Tom's put out there. One of the first slides I showed you early on was, here's how many districts we've moved repetitively, and this is the districts that we've moved over. But it's not a charter requirement to not move precincts every time. It's just one of those things where you're like, I would feel bad about it if we did it, and we do. It just happens. We have a public meeting. We generally try to do 2 so that the public can show up and bring up their issues. But it's just not one of those things that people come out and say, hey, I was in this and then he moved me and then he moved me back. I don't hear that concern. They want representation, I think, and they want to make sure that we validate it and we've looked at it properly. If we didn't, then I think we would hear about it.
Thank you. As a layperson, that sits in the back of my mind. You know.
Yeah, so.
Any other thoughts?
Well, the other thing I'm going to interject too, because I know we have some audiences here. When the public does get involved, they realize that this is not easy. And I think that's the challenge is people go, well, I don't understand why you did that. They need to get involved and try it because now you've tried it and it's really hard. People are like, I don't understand what your problem, it's just a real challenge. So I would recommend people try it and see that this is a challenge to make all the moving pieces fit together.
As our city keeps growing, this isn't an every 10-year process. This is an every 4 or 5 year process. So I'm hearing positivity on 11A. Commissioner Johnson, you have any input?
No, it's one of my favorite maps too.
Is there any interest in discussing any of the others? Otherwise, I mean, we can certainly entertain a motion.
Yeah, I'd make a motion to, are we approving or recommending 11A?
How would
I'll
that?
second.
Thank you. Recommendation? Okay. So we have a motion and we have a second. Any on 11A? Is there any further discussion?
I guess I would just like to get my input on the record. I'm in favor. I think this was my favorite map. I think it's got very solid equity across the 5 districts. And then also, I think some of our discussion has been forward-looking, thinking about our successors potentially 10 years from now. I think this is a very stable map that establishes some, Tom's had some great discussion for the group about those neighborhoods in Central District. I think a lot of that would stay constant, but probably the population there wouldn't grow very much. But I think there's some natural districts like precincts, like 511 and 513 that could go back to Central 10 years from now. I also see the center of gravity of the community moving towards the southeast. So I think this sets up a good southeast district that would be pretty easy to give smaller precincts like 2-3 and 2-6 up to the northeast, and those precincts along Minnesota Avenue to the southwest. So just coming from the southeast, this looks like something that we could reconvene in 10 years and have a little bit easier job. So I just like this map as something that will probably be pretty stable and has some forward-looking elements to it. So that's, in a nutshell, my preference for this map. So I would support Mr. Hurlburt's motion.
Thank you. Hearing no further discussion, can we take a roll call vote?
Commissioners Hurlburt,
Aye.
Johnson,
Aye.
Kipley,
Aye.
Millage,
Aye.
Timian.
Aye.
Thank you. That passed 5-0 on that recommendation of option C11A. We have a couple more items on the agenda. First is to discuss our future meeting date, and I know we have public meetings that we need to schedule.
Yes, Mr. Chair. So basically what you did tonight is you recommended a plan to be presented to the public. What my recommendation is, and I could either send out a poll or we can decide it tonight, is to hold the next meeting would be the public hearing required by charter. And I would recommend October 27th or 28th at 5:30 p.m. It seems like a good time for people to be able to get over here. So that process would require us to post this for a comment period on our website. And also, solicit comments from the public. The public hearing would generally just be, I don't want to say just, but it would be typically Jeff just reviewing all the options that were presented to the commission, and then the final option, and then opening up for public comment so that people may comment on it. At the conclusion of that hearing, you would make your final decision to present the plan to the city council, in which case I'll put together a report, circulate it for signature, and then it would get presented to the council. So my recommendation for the next meeting date, which would be the public hearing, is October 27th or 28th at 5:30 p.m. And I could, at your pleasure, either send out a poll for which one works best, and possibly with different times as well, or decide it tonight.
I think let's look at the doodle poll, send the poll to the commission. And I think if at all possible, we should try to look at evening time, whether it's this time or
Will do.
or later if possible.
Yep.
Thank you.
Well,
Commissioner Timian.
I guess I was just curious if people looked at their calendars when it's only 2 dates, if the 27th and 28th worked for others. Both those dates work for me.
Okay. Any time on those dates works?
Yes, and I think when the 5:30 was suggested, that'd be fine.
Okay. Anyone else have a conflict?
I have a conflict on the 27th, but the 28th is open.
Okay. 28th works. Commissioner Kipley?
I think we could make the 28th work.
You can make 28th work, the 5:30?
We can do it.
Let's do that.
Okay.
So October 28th, that's a Thursday at 5:30. Then the process after that,
Yes, Mr. Chair. So after that, once that meeting is concluded, the report will be prepared. There'll be a draft report for you at that public hearing. It'll be circulated for signature. If you elect that night to go forward with that final plan based on any comments that you had, you could sign it here. And then the next step, I would shoot for the second meeting of November of the City Council to present it. Typically, it has been the chair that has presented it. It's a fairly straightforward presentation, providing a copy of the map. The report that I put together, the draft just explains the process that the commission went through, the options they looked at, and some other administrative things, number of meetings, et cetera.
Okay,
So the second meeting in November, I believe, is the 9th.
okay, thank you. At this point in our meeting, next item on the agenda is public comment. If anyone from the public wishes to chime in, weigh in on our discussion and the process, you're welcome to step forward. For our benefit, please state your name.
My name is Mike Zierich of Sioux Falls. I gotta agree with Jeff, does a good work in moving all these precincts around. I've been playing around with them myself. I just wanted to introduce myself a little bit to this commission, because I made a recommendation to the charter revision about a few weeks ago, and they thought some of my changes would be beneficial to getting you guys thinking about it as well. One of my I raised the question at some point. I think some of you stated as well, the city's growing so much in a 25-year period from 91 to this year. What's another 30 years going to look like? At some point, as we go through the districting process every 4 or 5 years, 10 years, what's the chance of maybe expanding and creating new districts? So one of the questions I've asked with the revision committee was, what's that process look like, and what would the city look like if we were to expand, to add districts and get rid of some districts? I thought some of the questions I've asked them, what would be your thoughts on 7 districts and just 2 at large, which would give us a 9-member council? What would the city look like if we changed the districts to 28,000 per each district? That would be more representation for the people, smaller district. And I've asked the revision committee what was the real purpose of having 3 at-large districts, at-large reps, versus none, versus 2 or 1. So I thought I'm asking them for that question as well. Just kind of what as the city grows, what's the city going to look like 30 years from now? I mean, one of the questions that they asked back then was, back in 91, we had, each district had 20,000 people in it. Today, we got almost 40,000. What are the districts going to look like 30 years from now? We're going to have 50,000 per each district versus even more. And at some point, when do we, as we redistrict the city, at what point do we start adding districts? And pretty much a subtraction by addition. And it created some interesting conversation that day, and I thought I wanted to invite you guys into that conversation, because I believe the next charter revision is in a week or 2. And my recommendation is moving on through each one of those, because it actually affects 3 parts of the charter. And another thing I wanted to bring in, I got looking at some other cities around the area, 20 cities, a number of districts. I mean, Sioux Falls has 5. There's a few other ones that have 5, but it seems like the average city with 200,000 people, the average city has 9 districts, and that's each district has roughly 29,000, and that's kind of makes some interesting stats to look at, to ponder for down the road. So that's something I'm going to bring up at the next revision committee. That's something we should think about too. So that's just kind of show a mix of how different cities are aligned. I found it interesting as I was doing this research. Boise, Idaho, is going from a commission-based city to a district city. That created some interesting dialogue as well. Look that up. Part of my proposal would be creating 7 district cities. I'm looking kind of like Jeff. I've been kind of picking his brain a little bit. But what would the city look like if we have a north, south, east, west, and then split that core part of the city, expand it a little bit more, where you have a downtown district, and then with two central, east, at each central, east central and the west central, you kind of almost expand that core part of town. As a city, like I was telling the revision committee, as the city's really can't really go, ain't gonna be able to go south too much longer, but it's gonna go east and west. You're gonna go east, north, it's gonna go west in the north part, you're gonna go east in the southern part and the north part. At some point, what's the chances of just realigning the city a little bit in 7 districts? You're gonna go with 9 districts as well, but what would something like that think about? I kind of playing around with it. I was kind of like Jeff does, I've been kind of playing around with what a 7-district city would look like. And then, you can see this online. That's kind of some of the questions, some kind of questions, this discussion we had at the revision committee. And then, as you can see, paragraph 3 there, kind of some questions they're asking. They want to get from some questions they're going to bring up next week. They want more information on 7 different items there. I thought you guys are the districting committee. I think Ann is the one that told me to kind of talk to you guys a little bit, because you guys are more responsible for districting the city. So I thought, bring my concept to you guys and let you guys think about it. That's kind of some of the discussions they had, what they're pondering for next week. So, and then I
Mike,
just wanted to
thank
share
you.
that with you.
No, we appreciate you bringing that to us.
You can have this.
Thank you. Yeah, our task, as I understand it from the city council, is to take what we're working with and rework the current districts to rebalance them, but certainly your dialogue with the Charter Revision Commission, the research you've done, appreciate that. Thank you. Is there anyone else? Very good. Thank you. We have our next meeting date set. If there's no further discussion, I'll take a motion to adjourn.
Well, if I could.
Yes.
If I could, before we adjourn, would be to thank everyone for all the work they've done. Jeff with all these maps and Tom with keeping us up to date. Thank you for what you're doing to keep us moving forward on this.
Excellent point, Bob. It's like herding cats to some degree, but you know, we've made requests. We've had a number of meetings and asked to look at these different proposals. And when you compare this, take 11A and compare it to how the districts are now, I think to the point Tom and Joe and others have made earlier, you know, I think you've got here some of the core neighborhoods. Certainly we look at this and see the potential to grow that as the city grows. I think we're leaving a map here that has that potential to grow with the city and to continue to expand upon the central district, for example, under the current guide of the 5 districts. So yes, thank you.
Make
That-
the motion to adjourn?
Thank you, Commissioner Kipley. Do you need a second?
Second.
Thank you. Meeting adjourned.
Thanks, everyone.